After losing her husband, an elderly woman was forced to leave the house she once called home. She bought a rundown property in the small town of Camden, Alabama. But when she descended into the basement, she found an object that would change her life forever. Before the story begins, write in the comments where you heard it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Rain trickled down the front of Hannah Lewis's house in Camden. One of the wooden panels had completely rotted. The other creaked in the wind, as if echoing an old pain. When she first saw the house, she had imagined something different, perhaps a few flower pots, an old rocking chair on the porch. "This is all I can afford," she had said to herself that day. That sentence summed up her fate. Ever since her husband Robert died in a car accident, everything had felt expensive, distant. No one in the city where she could no longer pay rent wanted her anymore. Even when the landlord came to her door, it wasn't his voice but her silence that filled the room. "Since Mr. Lewis passed away, I've been lenient, Hannah," the man had said. "I only asked for a little more time." "2 years is quite a lot of time," he'd replied. Avoiding her gaze, that evening, she spent hours scrolling through housing listings. One was another disappointment. One, Ed said, recently renovated, but the photos showed mold covering the kitchen walls. Another said close to downtown, but the price was far too high. Then she saw it. Alabama, Camden, house for sale, low price. The photos were terrible, peeling paint, a sagging ceiling, rusty faucets, but below it read, "For sale, $9,000. And in that moment, she decided she would never pay rent again, no matter how bad it was. It would be her house. That night, as she packed her suitcase, she went through a few of Robert's belongings. She picked up his favorite coffee mug, cracked at the bottom, but she couldn't let it go. A memory echoed in her mind. Words Robert had said on their last night together. "Life teaches you to keep not only what's strong, but what's broken too." She placed the mug in her bag. When she arrived in Camden, the sky hung like a grey blanket. Though it was August, the air was cold. The town was silent, almost frozen in time. Puddles beneath the streetlights rippled in the wind. Somewhere, a dog barked. She stood before the house for a long while. Rotten steps, a crooked roof, a rusted doorknob. If Robert were there, he might have said, "Hannah, wait, let's find another place." But that voice was gone. When she opened the door, the smell of damp wood filled her nose. The floor sagged in places. In the kitchen, a strip of wallpaper hung loose, and beneath it, an old clock stopped. Hannah took a deep breath. Just like this clock, she thought. I haven't worked for a while either. She wiped the glass gently. The hands were frozen at 7:14. Maybe if I fix this house, I'll fix myself too, she murmured. That night, lying on a thin mattress laid over the creaking floor, she watched the shadows dance on the wall. The house carried the sounds of the past, as if the wind itself whispered Robert's name. "This place will be good for me," she said quietly. "Maybe starting over looks exactly like this." The next morning, she walked to the town centre, a few shops, a gas station, a church, and at the corner, a small bakery sign. Robert's Bakery. At first, she smiled. Such a coincidence almost felt like fate. She went inside. The smell of coffee filled her lungs. 2 elderly women sat by the window, eating pastries and quietly turning newspaper pages. The walls were lined with faded photographs, perhaps the bakery's old owners, passing their legacy from father to son. Behind the counter stood a middle-aged man. His face looked stern, but his eyes revealed kindness. "1 coffee, please," said Hannah. "New in town?" The man asked. "Yes, I just moved here." He nodded. "If you're looking for work, I could use someone for cleaning and serving." Hannah hesitated. She looked down at her hands, rough, aged, calloused. But she needed the job. "When can I start?" "Tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock." The man gave a small nod. "Name's Miller. I'm Hannah," she replied. Smiling, "Nice to meet you." "We'll see," he said with a faint grin. The next morning, as the sun rose, she walked to the bakery. The wind tugged at her hair. On the way, she saw a little girl holding a lollipop. Hannah smiled. The child smiled back. A wave of melancholy washed over her. All her life, she had wished for a daughter, but it had never happened. Robert used to say, "Maybe God didn't want us to be alone." Now, both God and Robert felt far away, but that little girl's smile filled the emptiness inside her. If only for a moment. Work at the bakery was slow but peaceful. Mr. Miller didn't talk much. But whenever Hannah quietly wiped a table, he'd say a simple thanks. That small word was enough to lift her spirits. When she got her first paycheck, she went to the florist and bought 2 small violet pots, one for the porch, one for the kitchen window. As she pressed her fingers into the soil, she heard Robert's voice in her mind. Violets are the most patient flowers when it comes to starting over. A week later, on a rainy afternoon, the door opened. A young, pregnant woman stepped inside. Her belly was round, her face pale, her hair tangled, and the bruises beneath her eyes would not escape a watchful gaze. Hannah set down the tray and approached. "Please, sit down." The woman sat slowly, eyes glistening. "Are you all right?" "Just tired," she murmured. "Can I have a coffee?" As Hannah poured the cup, she couldn't suppress her thoughts. "Tell me your name," she said softly. "Catherine. That's a lovely name." The woman's lips trembled with pain. "Would you like to talk a little?" Catherine shook her head. "Thank you. Maybe another time." Her hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped the cup. Hannah sat gently on the edge of the table. "Sometimes talking warms you more than a cup of coffee," she said. Catherine lowered her head. Tears fell, but she stayed silent. Hannah didn't ask anything. She gave her time. For a while, they just sat quietly. Outside, rain hit the glass. Inside, the silence between 2 strangers slowly turned into friendship. Hannah wrote something on a napkin and slid it across the table. "This is my address. You can come any time." The woman looked surprised, then smiled faintly. "Thank you. It's hard to believe good people still exist," she whispered. "Good people don't disappear," said Hannah. "They're just found a little late." Catherine left before finishing her coffee. Hannah watched her go for a long time. As raindrops ran down the window, the image of those bruises wouldn't leave her mind. That night, the rain battered the old house like 1,000 small hands. The wind whistled through the chimney, shaking the lamp and making shadows dance across the walls. Hannah watched the steam rising from the kettle, the only warmth left in the house. Then came a sound from outside, not the doorbell, just a faint knock on the doorknob, then another. She set her cup down on the counter, heart pounding. No one had ever come this late before. "Who's there?" she called. No answer, only the sound of rain, and then, faintly, a sob. Hannah approached the door. When she opened it, she saw a woman drenched from head to toe, hair stuck to her forehead, hands wrapped protectively around her belly. She recognized her immediately. Catherine. "Oh, dear God," Hannah whispered. "Come in, sweetheart, quickly." Catherine said nothing as she stepped inside. Water dripped from her shoes. Her arms were covered in bruises. Hannah hurried to fetch a blanket, wrapped it around her shoulders, and lit the stove. "Did someone hurt you?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. Catherine lowered her head. Tears streamed silently down her cheeks. "I ran away," she finally said. "From my husband? Tonight. I couldn't take it anymore." Her voice was so exhausted. The words seemed to stumble on their way out. Hannah said nothing at first. In that silence, she could hear the echo of her own pain from years ago, the same helplessness, the same loneliness. She took Catherine's trembling hands in hers. "You're here now. You're safe with me. That address you gave me." "I never forgot it," Catherine whispered. Hannah nodded. "This is your home now, too. No one will hurt you here." She sat her down on the couch, brought towels, dried her hair. In the kitchen, she brewed tea and brought some bread and jam. Catherine took the cup with shaky hands. "I've got a month left," she said quietly. "Until the baby?" "Yes. Do you have a doctor?" "No, he wouldn't let me. He didn't even want me to leave the house." Hannah's heart ached. "You don't need anyone's permission anymore," she said firmly. We'll build a new life here." That night, Hannah lay on the couch in the living room, listening to Catherine's breathing from the next room. The rain had stopped, and silence had settled in. Even the creaks of the old wooden walls sounded alive, as if, after so many years, the house was finally witnessing kindness again. When morning came, Catherine was still asleep. Hannah quietly went to the kitchen. For the first time in a long while, she felt peace. After breakfast, while Catherine was taking a bath, Hannah decided to go down to the basement. The night before, while searching for extra blankets, she had noticed an old wooden hatch, now holding a flashlight. She slowly descended the creaking stairs. The basement was cool and damp. Dusty shelves lined the walls, filled with rusted tools and old oil lamps. The beam of her flashlight caught something near the wall, a large, round vase covered in dust. She moved closer. It was cracked in several places, yet the design was still visible. Delicate gold patterns on a blue and white background, surrounded by lily motifs. When she brought the light nearer, she noticed a faint, almost invisible inscription on its body. She wiped the dust away with the back of her hand. Barely legible letters emerged. "Made in Jingdezhen, 18th century." Hannah's heartbeat quickened. A memory surfaced. A TV program she once watched with Robert years ago, about antique Chinese porcelain. "Some pieces are worth millions," the host had said. A spark flickered in her mind, but she quickly silenced it. "Maybe it's just a replica," she murmured to herself. Still, her hands were trembling. She cradled the vase carefully and climbed back upstairs. She set it on the kitchen table. As the light hit its surface, the lilies seemed to move. A feeling she hadn't known in years rose inside her. Hope. But at the same time, she felt shame. After all these years, "Do I still have a heart that thinks about money?" she whispered. Then she answered herself softly, "No, I have a heart that's still trying to live." When Catherine woke up that afternoon, Hannah had already hidden the vase inside a cupboard. Catherine looked stronger, but still uneasy. "If you want, we can go to the police," Hannah said. "No," the young woman replied quickly. "He'll find me." "Not yet." "All right." "There's no rush. But one day he'll face justice." Tears welled in Catherine's eyes. "Why did you accept me so easily?" Hannah rubbed her hands on a napkin and looked down. "Because once I waited for someone to accept me too, but no one came." Silence lingered for a while. Then Catherine whispered, "Maybe God sent you to me." Hannah smiled. "Or maybe he sent us to each other." But her mind wandered back to the basement. That vase. Maybe it was worth a fortune. Maybe it was just an old piece of clay. Yet the feeling that it held a secret refused to leave her. As she lay in bed, she whispered into the dark, "Robert, I wish you were here. You'd know what to do." But Robert wasn't there, only Hannah. Catherine and the unborn baby remained, and within the old house, something new was beginning to grow. The next morning, Hannah was resolute. The town's antique shop, Wesley's Old Finds, was a small, dusty place. She wrapped the vase in a blanket and tucked it into her bag. "I've got a few errands," she told Catherine. The young woman smiled weakly. "Be careful." The sky was clear as she walked through the town square, now painted in shades of blue. The antique shop bell jingled softly as she entered. The owner, an elderly man with glasses resting on the tip of his nose, looked up. Hannah gently placed the vase on the counter. "I found this in my basement," she said. "Could it be worth anything?" The man's expression changed. He reached out with trembling hands, examining it carefully. After a long silence, he removed his glasses. "Ma'am," he said gravely, "this is 18th century Chinese porcelain. If it's genuine, and it appears to be, it could be worth millions." Hannah's eyes widened. "Millions?" He nodded. "Roughly $10 million. For a moment she couldn't speak. It felt like a dream. For the first time in years, her knees felt weak, not from exhaustion but from hope. When she stepped outside, the town's wind swept through her hair. Her hands trembled in her pockets. The sky was no longer grey. It was a bright, endless blue, and in her heart, one thought echoed, maybe God was just waiting for the right time. Morning in Camden was brighter than it had been in years. The rain had given way to sunlight, and the air felt newly born. The house that once stood in silence now seemed to breathe. Catherine was in the kitchen, making breakfast, a soft melody playing on the radio. That afternoon, Hannah decided to sell the vase. Wesley, the shop owner, looked surprised by her determination. "Are you sure? Auctions can take time. You might even get more." Hannah shook her head. "I don't have that kind of time," she said quietly. "This money isn't meant to wait. It's meant to give life." Within a week, the sale was finalized. Wesley handled the process meticulously. When Hannah left the shop with an envelope in her hand, her heart was pounding. Inside was a bank certificate worth $10 million, an amount she could never have dreamed of in her lifetime. But her eyes filled with tears. Not from joy, but from memory. "Robert," she whispered, "what would you have done?" And then she answered softly, "You would have started with kindness." That evening, she didn't tell Catherine the truth. The young woman still looked fragile, haunted, but Hannah could see the strength of a mother growing inside her. Catherine's belly was now round and firm. They shared dinner together. "This town is lovely," Catherine said, stirring her soup. "It's the kind of place that gives people second chances," Hannah replied. "Like you." "People like me only find shelter here," Hannah said gently. "But people like you, you're the ones who are reborn." A week later, Hannah walked into the town's law office. A brass plaque read, "Mitchell and Hayes, Attorneys at Law, Mr. Mitchell." A gray-haired man in a neat suit looked up as she entered. "I need to help someone," she said. "Legally, I want to protect a woman from her husband." He raised his eyebrows. "A domestic abuse case?" "Yes, she ran away. She's with me now. If he finds her—" "I understand," he said calmly. "We'll handle it discreetly." Hannah met his gaze. "Don't worry about the cost," she said firmly. "If I have to, I'll buy the whole town." Days passed. With Hannah's support, Catherine began to heal. The bruises faded, replaced by a pale kind of hope. Her baby grew stronger, and each morning she'd grab Hannah's hand and laugh. He moved. Hannah would smile through tears, always hiding behind the same excuse. "Just got dust in my eyes." Catherine could now go outside, even take short walks to the bakery. One morning, Hannah came out to the porch with 2 cups of coffee. "You know," she said, smiling, "Robert and I once dreamed of opening a bakery here. A small, cozy place. People could have coffee in the mornings, kids could eat cake. We were going to call it Robert's." Catherine lowered her head. "Maybe we still can." Hannah froze for a moment. "Maybe," she whispered. But peace didn't last long. One evening, as the wind howled outside, a furious pounding hit the door. This time, it wasn't gentle. It was angry, demanding. Hannah jumped. Catherine's face turned pale. "He found me," she whispered. "Don't open the door, Hannah, please." But the knocking came again, louder. Then a man's voice roared, "Catherine, open the door!" Hannah froze for a second. Then fear gave way to determination. She went to the door and kept the chain locked. "Leave," she said firmly. "This woman doesn't belong to you anymore. Stay out of it, old woman." "She's my wife!" "Not anymore." The man cursed and kicked the door. But the chain held. Hannah looked straight into his eyes, not with age's weariness, but with a newfound courage. "Take one more step and I'll call the police. My lawyer's ready." "You're finished." The man hesitated, then stepped back. Moments later, the sound of a car engine faded into the distance. Catherine collapsed to the floor. Sobbing, Hannah knelt beside her and held her close. "It's over," she whispered. "This time it's really over." The trial lasted for weeks. Thanks to Mr. Mitchell's efforts, Catherine won full protection and divorce. Everyone in town was talking about it. The story of an elderly woman who saved a young mother had become Camden's legend. But Hannah stayed out of the spotlight. For her, the only thing that mattered was the light in Catherine's eyes, the light that had replaced fear. One morning, Catherine said, "I need to tell you something." Hannah set down her coffee. "What is it?" "The baby's coming soon. I don't know how we'll manage the hospital." "Don't worry about that," Hannah said with a smile. "You'll give birth in the best hospital there is." Catherine frowned. But we don't have the money. Hannah opened a drawer and took out a small envelope. Inside was the bank certificate. Now we do, she said softly. More than enough. Tears filled Catherine's eyes. You did this for me? Hannah nodded. For you and for that baby? Because I was never a mother, but maybe now I can be one. A month later, Hannah and Catherine traveled to Montgomery, Alabama. A modern hospital with spotless white walls awaited them. As Catherine was taken into the delivery room, she gripped Hannah's hand. Stay with me, she whispered. Tears in her eyes. I'm not going anywhere, Hannah replied. Hours later, the sound of a baby's cry filled the corridor. Hannah, waiting outside, felt her knees give way. She laughed and cried at once. When the doctor emerged, smiling, he said, Mother's healthy. Baby's healthy. What's the name? From inside the room, Catherine called out, Hannah! Hannah covered her mouth with her hands as tears streamed down her face. In that moment, every emptiness inside her finally felt whole. When they returned home a few weeks later, Hannah hung a new sign on the porch. Handmade, white background with gold lettering. It read, Robert's Bakery, established 2025. The town's children woke to the smell of cake in the mornings, and the elderly sipped their coffee there. Catherine worked behind the counter, keeping an eye on the stroller, while Hannah served customers with a gentle smile. One evening after closing, Hannah switched off the shop lights. Catherine came to her side. We really are like a family now, she said softly. Hannah hugged her. I never had a child, she said. But now I have 2 daughters. One is you and the other is little Hannah. Crying, Catherine rested her head on the older woman's shoulder. Then this bakery is a home for the 3 of us. Hannah smiled. Her eyes drifting into the distance, a light wind moved through the town's quiet streets. Yes, she whispered, this is our home. Autumn comes slowly in Camden. The leaves don't hurry, and even the wind is patient. Hannah Lewis sat on the porch, watching the colors of the trees with a cup of hot tea in her hands. Reds, yellows, oranges, blended together like that quiet peace where past and present meet. The vanilla scent drifting from Robert's Bakery spread through the whole street with the breeze. On the small wooden sign by the door, the gold letters still shone. Robert's Bakery. Estune 2025. Little Hannah's handprints marked the bakery window. Catherine smiled as she served customers behind the counter, and Hannah moved slowly among the tables. She used a cane now, but it wasn't a burden. It was a memory. An old walnut cane Robert had made in his youth. Every morning when she picked it up, the same prayer rose inside her. Let me be good for someone today. 5 years had passed since Catherine gave birth. Little Hannah was in school now, and every day when she came home, she ran to the bakery kitchen to play with dough. Everyone in town knew them as a family. Camden's 3 generations of women. Catherine had found her youth again, smiling. Strong, standing tall, and someone new had entered her life. Daniel Harper. He was Catherine's new co-worker. A quiet, dependable man. The first time he came by, Hannah studied him carefully. Age brings a sense that spots lies at once, but there was neither lie nor arrogance in Daniel's eyes. Only love, respect, and patience. That night, Catherine slipped into the kitchen and whispered excitedly, I think there's someone, Hannah. The older woman smiled. Don't lock the door of your heart. But don't hand over the key right away either. I can't be as wise as you. You don't need wisdom. Just make it through your mistakes. Months passed, and Daniel's love grew not in words but in deeds. When one evening Catherine finally turned to Hannah and said, He proposed. Hannah didn't say anything. She just took her hand and cried quietly. Why the tears? Catherine asked. Because at last, someone deserves you, Hannah said. The wedding was small but warm. In the town church, a hall decorated with white flowers, a soft wind outside. Little Hannah clung to her mother's skirt and whispered throughout the ceremony, Mom, are you crying? When Catherine hugged Hannah, the older woman smiled and said, These tears are for joy. Even Robert's absence was remembered with a kind of peace. Look, Robert, she said inwardly, their story is the continuation of what we left unfinished. From that day on, The bakery became something else entirely. Daniel helped with repairs. Whenever he was off work, Catherine tried new recipes, and little Hannah offered cookies to customers. The townspeople noticed the love the older woman had poured into this trio. "They don't just bake bread," they'd say. "She bakes hope." Time moved at its own pace, and Hannah's body began to slow. Her hands trembled more often, and a faint ache rose from her knees each morning as she stood, but the expression on her face never changed. Calm, peaceful, complete. One morning Catherine saw her staring into the distance on the porch. "You're holding tea, but haven't drunk it," she said. "Sometimes holding it is enough." Hannah replied with a smile. "What are you thinking about?" "Life," she said quietly. "What once felt like too much is now just right." That day, Hannah took an envelope from the drawer of an old cabinet. Catherine's name was written on it. "Keep this," she said. "But don't open it until I tell you." Catherine was surprised. "What is it?" "Not a gift," Hannah said. "A reminder." Catherine was about to object, but Hannah's gaze was so firm that she fell silent. A year later, as winter turned to spring, Hannah fell ill. It began like a cold, but deepened into a growing fatigue. The doctor said the elderly woman's heart had weakened. Catherine couldn't understand why she still wanted to stop. "By the bakery every morning. Rest a little," she said one day. Leaning on her cane, Hannah stood. "Rest. I've rested my whole life, Catherine. I still choose living." The next morning at sunrise, Hannah came to the bakery. She opened the door and filled her lungs with the smell of coffee. She left a small note on the counter. "Close a little early today. The weather's nice. Take little Hannah to the park." Then she sat in the chair on the porch. She closed her eyes and let the wind stroke her hair. The violets swayed gently. For a moment, she heard Robert's voice. "Are you ready, Hannah?" She smiled. "Yes," she whispered. "Everything has found its place." That evening, when Catherine came home, she saw the half-finished teacup on the porch. Hannah sat there, head tilted to one side, a peaceful smile on her face. Catherine's scream cut through the town's quiet. But Hannah had already joined the silence, like a prayer, like a kindness. On the day of the funeral, the whole town was there. The small church overflowed with flowers. Photos of Hannah at the bakery hung on the walls. Catherine struggled to speak, but at last, in a trembling voice, she said, "I never knew my mother, but God sent me one, and her name was Hannah Lewis." A week later, Catherine opened the envelope Hannah had left. Inside was a short letter and a document. The letter read, "Dear Catherine, I leave you this house, the bakery, and everything in it. But I ask only one thing of you. Keep this as a home, a place where people can come when they've lost themselves. Because here I found not just a house, but a family. I never had children, but God gave me 2 daughters. One is you, and one is little Hannah. When you read these lines, don't be sad. For the first time, I'm leaving this world without leaving it lesser." Catherine pressed the letter to her chest as quiet tears fell. Then she went to the kitchen and touched the pot of violets. A leaf had fallen, but the roots were still strong. "You'll always be with us," she said. Years passed. Robert's bakery still stands in the center of Camden. A small sign hangs at the door. "Hannah's Corner, open to all. Room for every heart." Catherine runs the business now, and little Hannah has grown up to stand beside her mother. And every morning, when the shop opens, the first cup of coffee is left on the empty chair on the porch. As the wind carries the steam away, the townspeople always say the same thing. This is still Hannah Lewis's home. If you listen to Hannah's remarkable story all the way to the end, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel.